Welcome to Redefining Engagement. I'm Francesca Duma, Director of Audience Development and Strategy at Contribly. And in this show, I speak to leaders and innovators in the media industry so that we can bring tips, wisdom, ideas, and even some things to avoid so that we can all do more engagement better. So without further ado, let's move on to our next guest. Hello, Theo. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. I'm really looking forward to our chats today because, as everybody knows, we talk about engagement, especially in news media. But I think you might have a bit of a different perspective from very different experience. So, really looking forward to getting into it. How about we start with an introduction?
Sure. Thank you for having me, Francesca. It's an honor, and I'm happy that you decided to have a filmmaker in your podcast and not someone from the news industry. That changed. I'm someone who is always walking around stories. I'm a filmmaker at heart. I started filmmaking when I was in high school in France. We called that the second. I think I was 15 years old at the time, filmmaker. Then I turned as a narrative strategist with the current day and age, with the fact that we were kind of losing connection to one another. I'm helping now creators and founders to work on their narrative, to build their narrative equity. But my work has always been around stories, basically. The stories we tell, the stories we hide, the stories that makes us who we are. So that's what drives me.
And it's so important for media because we are storytellers in a sense with facts. Mm-hmm. So I guess I'm very interested in looking at the point of view of how we can tell our story better as news brands. And we talk a lot about audience engagement in this interview. And I'm guessing audience engagement is a very important part of storytelling. How about we start off with what does an audience engagement mean to you in general?
Well, in general, for me, what that means is someone who is interested and has something at stake in what they're watching or listening. And in the film making industry, in the TV industry also, that's really what matters. Because if you just sat in front of a film and there is nothing interesting and no stakes, you're probably going to fall asleep or get bored. So for me, it's really about what we are giving to the audience and what is in there for them. The universe that we are creating, we are welcoming them in it. So that's really what engagement is. They can relate to what we are doing.
Something at stake. What do you mean by at stake?
Stakes, for me, we need at some point to be sitting on the edge of our seat. Otherwise, there's no, it's not interesting. And it's in film, and I see that in the news also. If we just read news because we want to read news, we're probably going to consume it, but not really be involved in the news. However, let's take someone who is a sports fan, for example, going to read the news about last night's game. Well, they're going to be at stakes. They want to know if the teams they're supporting is really doing well. What are the notes? Who scored something? And that's what I see as stakes. Right now there is a conflict in Israel. Well, if someone listens to the news, well, there is a stakes. The stakes are super high actually, because it's actually we're talking about death, we're talking about human. So stakes, it's something where your humanity is involved, I think.
So it's about emotion, people's emotions and how they interact with the content from an emotional point of view.
Yeah, I would agree with that, yeah.
And something at stake is really interesting because in the news industry, we know that crime works really well, war works really well. However, it's also the reason people are leaving the news. They're avoiding the news because there's so much depression and the rest. So how can we use that idea of at stake in everything else that we're doing that is very important as well?
No, yeah, totally. And I think you said something interesting, because when there is the news in a way are mirroring our internal conflicts. So we are seeing a car accident. Okay, we are on the edge. We're looking at it. But the stakes can be created by truth, and also by the texture of how you are bringing the emotion. And that's a super good word that you used earlier, emotion, because when we say something, I believe that the news industry used to say report. You were reporting. It's how we call reporters. But today in this day and age, we want to have a little bit of a story when we hear something, and it can be interesting to understand that in the way that you are crafting your messaging. It doesn't have to be about the war. It doesn't have to be about a car accident. It can be about something else, but it needs to be involving the person in front of you. It can't be selfish, if I may, or individual. It needs to be thinking about the collective, everybody, the person in front of you, basically. the recipient.
And I love that. Thank you. I guess we were talking a lot when we met before having this interview. We were talking about storytelling as a strategy.
Yeah.
And we all know in the media industry, there's almost a bit of a, not marketing. And sometimes when we talk about emotion, we feel like we're talking about marketing. So
Yeah.
tell me a bit, can you explain the difference between storytelling as a strategy and not a marketing tactic, for example?
Yeah. So yeah, totally. We talked about it because for me, it's like what we do sits as strategy as, storytelling as strategy and not storytelling as marketing. Because marketing, in a way, it's like tricks that sells, basically. It's like you are going to put everything in order so you can get the selling point. And we see that a lot now with like the new news outlets. Like if you look at a podcast, what do? They use marketing tactics, I think like clickbait, like name on the podcast so people go on it. But this is a tactic that sell, but strategy is more like, for me, a shift in perception. It's like by changing our own perception about what we are doing and by involving the other one. Again, engagement. Well, if you just play 50% of the game, go on part, but not the other, you will just sit at a place which is tactic marketing, sorry. But when you shift the perception, you are shifting your own perception and you are bringing the whole game to the table. So I think it's like really like the different, it's like storytelling, if it involves everybody, well, you will have more impact.
So really you're saying instead of micro moments where we're thinking of how we're marketing to our audience, we need to be telling our entire story differently and our entire team need to be on board with how we talk about ourselves. Is that where you're going with that?
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, it's like what we noticed is marketing is, again, tactics. It's like you're going to do like a marketing campaign to get the results. Like you are like crafting something for an outcome. It's basically what marketing is. And it's great. Like if you use it properly, it's good. But storytelling strategy is more about us, about like what we want to do, like the behind, like the message behind, the meaning behind it. So once you understand that, you will craft your messaging differently because you will be more aware of the world. And I believe that in the news industry, it can be like really applied because you just don't report anymore. You have to be involved. And by being involved, you can involve also your audience and get the engagement that you are after.
I guess the news industry in general has always had a very strong sense of self. We are very much the people who hold power to account. We are very much the ones who uphold democracy because we're informing people the information that they need to know to be able to make the right decisions in their life day in, day out. And yet we live in this world where people are avoiding the news, where trust in the news and media is at a historic low. And yet journalism is so essential. So how are we not telling our story better? How should newsrooms be thinking about their story?
I think that the news industry maybe lost truth when it became about clicks and more like over clarity. And unfortunately, I don't think it is really like the news industry's fault, but it's just like we got like so consumed by social media and the internet. Like the past 20 years have been like changing so much, I think, for us. And the population went through what I like to call a crisis of consciousness in a way. It's like we were like receiving so much information that at some point, like our brain stopped like really be able to treat the information properly. And the way to get people to treat the information was by just making like a bait. And so they were clicking and not like really understanding it. And I believe that's where like the truth got lost. And if we notice, it's like it's even like bigger than the news industry because people don't really trust politics anymore. And anywhere you go, like you're in the UK, I'm in France, I used to be in the US, like we don't really trust politics anymore. Like, let's be honest, like yesterday, the new mayor of New York got elected. And if you look at the numbers, it's like New Yorkers didn't really go to vote. You know, it's like, it's crazy to think about it. So we didn't adapt in every industry and even like the filmmaking industry, we'll talk about it in seconds, but we didn't really adapt to the pace of the world. And like we were just like catching and trying to catch behind and like we were like running late. And that happened in politics, that happened in the news industry, and that's happened in filmmaking.
Do you think that better storytelling is potentially part of the solution?
I think yes, because storytelling is almost like remembering why we exist, why we're here. You know, like the reason why we're doing this. Like you're doing a podcast, you're running a company, there is reason behind it. And it's also with like proper storytelling, we're going to stop lying to ourselves.
Lying to ourselves. So are you almost saying that the version that we're telling ourselves of who we are is not the right one? Or is it the storytelling is going to help us make that clearer?
I think both what you said.
I guess at the moment, the storytelling is very selfish, at least for news brands. We believe that we are what holds democracy together. We believe that we're doing the right thing by showing facts and the rest of it, but we've not necessarily invited our audience into the storytelling. We've not considered that second half. Is that something that you look at when you're building your strategies around storytelling for founders, but also for industries?
Yeah, totally. And you said something interesting. You said that news industry think that they're holding democracies. They see themselves as like one of a pillar, you know. There is amendment in the American Constitution talking about news. There is like everywhere the news is protected. So there is this belief, but it's why I'm saying that we should stop lying to ourselves, because today, well, for a lot of people, for the population, it might not be the case anymore because, as we said, they don't trust the news industry anymore. So if they don't trust the news industry anymore, is the news industry still the pillar of democracy? Well, maybe not, because they got lost in the game at some point. So it's about, like, I think, looking in the mirror and be like, okay, we have an issue. We didn't catch the right train, but we still have the time to reinvent ourselves. And it requires a lot of personal effort and, you know, to be like, okay, I was wrong, or at least I didn't do it properly. And now I'm going to ask myself the right question as an industry to get back to where I belong.
Oh, big, very difficult thing to do. Where would you start? Yeah.
I mean, the truth is, like, look, the film business, again, same thing. The film business, like, there is less and less people going to the movie theaters. Since when? Since Netflix basically appeared. So, and it was kind of the same. I mean, Netflix was a little bit later, but it was kind of the same. Both industries are facing the same issue, but both industries are archaic in a way, and they like they put themselves in the pedestal. So the first thing is we need people at the head who are able, I think, to take criticism, to understand the positive criticism, and to be able to change things. And this is not easy. I'm here like giving lessons, and it's not like, I'm not saying like we can do it like tomorrow, but like since we're talking about it, it's like in France, for example, I see, and in the US, I was seeing the same problem. It's like, why people are not here anymore? Why people are not following anymore? It can't be just pointing the finger at them. At some point, the people in charge need to point the finger at themselves, because what we saw in the film industry is like, what, the past 10 years, like, you have like the movies are all the same because they didn't want to reinvent themselves. What they were doing is like they were using the only one metric that was like working was like young people, and they were giving them like Spider-Man and Marvel movies. So you, me, and everybody else ended up watching Marvel movies, and we're like, okay, but like it's not how we like used to watch movies. And in the news, it's like people started doing podcasts. And at the beginning, podcasting like was a good conversation. But then we had like all those founders of companies, all those important person were not going to the channel anymore, like to the TV, for example, to regular TV, but they were going to a podcast. They were not giving an interview to the New York Times, but they were going to a podcast. So this shows a change of behaviors. And when we are who we are, we need to adapt to the behaviors change, because otherwise we're just going to end up like giving news and making movies for ourselves.
And what are so we need to interflect. We need look at ourselves. What are we doing wrong? What are we missing? Are we understanding people's behaviors? And then I guess part of it is also, what voice do we tell these stories in? Like how do we become authentic? And I guess content creators are very good at that. They come across as extremely authentic and inviting. What can we learn from how content creators, the film industry, how they're doing things? How can the news industry learn from that?
What I think is interesting in content creation is like, it's not about creating content. It's about creating a universe. It's about creating something bigger. And so you can belong. And people crave belonging. We are like in a hyper-connected era, but we are all so disconnected from one another that you crave to have someone that can talk to you, someone who can like be like, okay, I see you, I hear you, I really understand what you feel. And if you make them feel at home in your world, well, they will listen to you. They will do that. But I think media should maybe like stop chasing news cycles and maybe start building like an emotional world where we can have our seat.
I so agree. I think I always talk about there's more ways of communicating than there ever have been. I can go on social media, I can shout, I can send emails. There's so many ways, but we don't necessarily feel listened to. And that's something that I think content creators do extremely well. And I keep going to these conferences, and sometimes I even heard one person say, oh, we should invite content creators into the news industry because they're basically actors.
Yep.
And that really annoyed me in a sense, because for me, it's like, well, no, they're not actors. They actually are doing so much more. They are inviting people in. So what you're saying, how do we change that? Like, what would you say the first step is to changing, inviting our audience in? What could that look like?
You said something super interesting. It's like inviting content creators. What a lot of people are not realizing is that most companies, most founders, most like solopreneurs basically are heading in an era where we're all going to be our own media company. You have a company, you own a media. I do films, I own a company, and we are doing like different kind of like we have a publishing company in house. So we are all media companies in a way, like at least the future requires that. So content creators just understood that before, like the regular classic kind of business company, And to come back to your question, the one thing to do is today, someone who is like 16 with a phone and someone who is like 50 can consume news, but they will never be told the same. Like we can't talk to them the same way. If you try to craft your message, especially for one or the others, they will feel it. Like if you are like 35 like me and I'm trying to speak with like my teenage cousin who is like 18, he will look at me like that. I can't use the same words. He will just like, I will look like I'm like 65 and he will be like, no, I think you're so wrong. And again, and if I go to my grandmother who is 82 and she will not understand. I mean, that's something. So I need to do what is me. I need to speak with my own voice. And by doing that, it's also being like accepting what works and doesn't work. I think we are taking ourselves too seriously at some point. And it's also about like coming down, like, breathing and like just slowing down and be like, okay, actually I have flaws like everybody else. And if I want to talk to you, I will talk to you the way I know how to do it. So for news outlets, like they need one liner, one true line that they go through. And then for the audience, they can choose, okay, I'm going to go like, at some point, the Huffington Post did that. They had like a very kind information that was specific to them. And if you wanted that information, you were going to the Huffington Post. If you want something super long, you go to the Time magazine and you have like interview for like 14 pages of like a founder. And great, you have another piece of information. And probably that those two with their voice didn't have the same audience. The engagement was different, totally. But now what we saw is like a news outlet will have Instagram and they will talk the same way to you, me, the 65 grandfather and the kids. So at the end, like no one really see what matters to ourselves. And so we stop listening. So the one thing would be like, get one voice and stick to it.
We're trying to be everything for everyone. And we're trying to do the same message in 100 different ways, and it's not working. Like everybody in the news industry are like, we need to talk to young people. We need young people because our audience is dying. And actually, you're saying, pick your niche. Who are you serving? You can't be everything for everyone. What are you good at? And do that extremely well.
Look at Fox News. Fox News is the example of that. I mean, I don't watch Fox News, but they have their listeners, they have their audience that are like pretty, like they are showing up all the time because what? Fox News tell them one thing and like, that's what they have. And all the other, I mean, there's other outlet, but like, I think it's interesting to see that those guys, because they have their niche and their niche was controversial, was like whatever they were defending, well, they stick to it and they got the audience, which like drove me nuts. Why the other guys are not doing it?
But isn't that so polarizing? I guess as a pillar of society, and obviously we are businesses, we need to be able to pay our staff. But at the same time, we are a pillar of society, and that's almost as important. So we're in this place where there is the right thing to do, and then there is the extreme. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be authentic. I think we still can be authentic in our own voice and still be a pillar of society. But it's a different, I guess it's a different world in news media potentially.
Yeah, it is. But it makes me think about Disney, Walt Disney. The Disney company. So when I grew up, Walt Disney was about like cartoons, and like we had Mickey Mouse and we had Cinderella and all that. They evolved by acquiring the Star Wars company. They evolved by acquiring the Marvel company and ESPN. So they still have at the core of their company the desire to make something appealing to the family, But it's not just Mickey Mouse and Cinderella. You can also have Skywalker and a Jedi. So they have a niche. And I don't think it's polarizing because it's like broader. And to tie it back to the news industry, obviously Fox is an extreme example, and I'm not like advising anybody to become Fox, and at least if we less of them would be better. It's more about like, again, not lying to yourself. Okay, there are things that you can do and there are things that you can't do. And don't try to make it up, because you will probably sound ridiculous if you do something that is out of range for you.
Very true. Very true. And I guess revenue is a very important piece of this. So on one side, you could have the best storytelling in the world, but if you aren't in front of the right audience, that's a big challenge. And one of the challenges that newsrooms have had for a very, very long time now is that we over-rely on social media.
Yep.
We have this massive need to get readers to come back to our own sites and not just spend all of their time on social media, because we need to be sustainable, because without sustainability, we can't continue being a pillar of society. So how should we be using storytelling to help us do that? How can we get people to come to our own sites, to engage with us? What should we be doing for that?
I think you said something again interesting, the content creation. Content creation is like, again, reinventing yourself. People are not coming to sites anymore. Why? Because there is not what they're looking for. And what are they looking for? Today we consume information, not just news, information in way different ways that we used to do it when we grew up. So it's about making it appealing again, and again, removing what like looks archaic. So I see content creation as working really well. Right now on Instagram, we used to have like the vertical format, like for like years, obviously. And I don't know if you noticed, but like for the past 6-8 months, now we have the horizontal one. And it creates a deeper like connection, because you are like, instead of having my face right here on your phone and just the face talking to you, now it's like you have like this banner and you are involved in the world. There is a website, a news website, not really, but kind of big thing, who like creates long pieces of content. They do like interviews that looks cool, that don't just like, they're not just sitting at a round white table that looks boring with like boring questions. So they're trying to make them engaging. A lot of like, again, we talked about podcasts. A lot of person are like doing podcasts, but it's about like creating content forms that are like appealing. And once you do that, I think they will definitely go to your website and check them out. But like, first of all, we have to take the audience seriously. And I think at some point, like they were not taken seriously by both the news industry and the film industry. And they're not that stupid that we think. So they stopped, like they left.
If we build it, they will come is not the right sentence for anybody. And it's a lot of developer mentality. I build something and it automatically has value because I built it. And actually, no, we need to be listening to our audience and inviting them in to understand what works for them most. What storytelling mistakes do you think organizations are making? What are the big challenges when they're creating stories?
I will say that they want to talk about too many topics. There is something that we say is like cut the meat, just cut the fat, and keep the meat. So when you have like stories that kind of are boring, it's because there's like too many informations that are giving to you. And it's because it's tapping in one of our like, I think, deepest fear, where we are like, fear of judgment, fear of not being seen. So we just give so much. And by the end, this is overwhelming for the person in front of you, like on the receiving end. So it's like, we should go back to simplicity, like really remove what it's not mattering, what is not important, and just like finding the core of what we want to say. And I see that like very often. We're like, okay, you're just like telling like 3 pages, but you could have like give us a summary of like 1 or 2 paragraphs, and you would have been more powerful.
So less is more. That's definitely one big challenge. Are there other challenges that we're doing wrong in storytelling?
I mean, in storytelling in general or in news?
You can tell me both. They might.
Well, there's like less and more, sure. And then there's the fact that like we are like, there's a lot of fluff. There's a lot of things that like we don't really care. And it's because we are so looking for the clickbait, so looking for the new scandal, so looking for to like be still relevant. And I think it's like, again, one of our fear, like we are relevant to, like we are afraid to still be relevant tomorrow. And like, because of that, we just don't act as we should be acting. We are not acting genuinely. And like, if I'm just like saying things that are not genuine, you will be like, okay, what is this guy talking about? And you will not like believe me. And that mistake from my end will break the truth. And I think that since we are so much after something to get, we kind of lose ourselves in the process, and we just like give information that we should not be giving. So the issue with storytelling is like, maybe be more like truthful, even if it's not, doesn't mean like you have to say something every hour, a bit more truthful, and you will create a longer connection.
It's interesting because there's a fear. Fear is an emotion that I feel stops most innovation. And it's an emotion, I think newsrooms potentially find it hard to be vulnerable, to be real. I think there is a fear that's stopping that. But there is also a fear of we're not going to be able to pay the bills. We're not going to be able to change the way that we do things. And that's potentially the thing that's stopping us the most. And also because there is a fear that if we bring emotion into the news, it might change facts. It might make the truth. And because there is a difference between truth and facts. And so I think the idea of bringing emotion into stuff is almost a concern for journalists. Should they be concerned about that?
Well, yes and no, but because being vulnerable doesn't mean that you have to be oversharing. We don't ask you to like tell us what you had for breakfast and how your kids are doing. It's not really that. It's more like it's precision with the emotion, you know? And I think that people they don't trust perfection. They trust like perspective. And in perspective, there is a part of you. And it's why I think also podcasting right now is so like popular, is because we are put on the spot. We're asking ourselves questions. We are like debating, like, you know, because debate doesn't exist anymore in like the political realms. Like we just like, we give a perspective. Doesn't mean like we are right or wrong. And actually that doesn't matter. It's just that the perspective is, and that shows that like, okay, that person is just opening up a little bit without being like oversharing, without being like giving us information that we don't really care. I think it's one thing that could be interesting.
And where do you think storytelling is headed in the next 3 years? Obviously, you've said massive changes for news industry, massive changes for the film industry. Where do you think it's going? We have so much more tech than ever before. Where are we heading?
Well, I think audiences will expect transparency and emotional depth, not like the polish. Like I saw lately on platform like LinkedIn, now that what is really like rewarded is when you talk without even like a cut. It's just kind of crazy if you think about it. It's like literally seeing you like putting out your phone. And podcasting industry changed a lot because it used to be like radio. Now you're like putting videos. It's like we want that connection because we are so again disconnected from one another. That is like an intimacy and a co-creation. But as storytelling more in general, I do think that like for companies at least, we are seeing like emergent solopreneurs because we have so much technology. A lot of work are disappearing. So we see the internet is basically flooded with like people who are just like starting a company on their own. There are a lot of them. And if they want to be sustainable, they will have to say something that is different than the person next door. So they will have to go back to the fundamentals, to the basics, to who they are. And that's where like I think storytelling is headed.
Theo, I think you have the same Instagram or TikTok algorithm as me, where you're getting every solopreneur coming up. It's crazy. It's so many of them every day. Tell me how, if you were going to work with a newsroom, using all of everything that you've learned in storytelling, where would you start? What could you offer a newsroom that you might be working with to help them kind of go through their storytelling journey so that they can come out the other end with hopefully more engaged audiences?
The first thing is we're going to stop talking about what you do, but we're going to like go to understand why you are a journalist in the first place and what the reason behind your specific news outlet, your company, you know, like, and that is what like I think is very interesting because at the end you're just doing news, okay, which is like pillar of society. It's wonderful. It's huge. Why are you doing this? Why, like, we don't care about section and like what makes you look cool, but really like the reason. And I'm sure there's a person in charge of the newsrooms, there's a person in charge of a magazine. Okay, what brings you here? And like, if that person tells you, I just want to make money, or I just want to like fund like multiple companies, well, you might not be the right one to be in charge. Like, if you are in charge of this kind of businesses, there is a deeper, super like important, vulnerable reason why you're doing that.
How do you link the idea of the people leading the newsroom and the individuals to the brand? Because obviously people are now moving towards individuals and following people. When it's a big brand like The Guardian or the New York Times, or obviously a local brand, how do you then do the storytellings? Because that's a fear. They think, oh, if we invite content creators in, people are following the content creator. They're not following us as a group of journalists. Is there something in there that you look at as well?
Well, yeah, because like you're totally right. Like right now, it's like companies are represented by one founder. I mean, we hear about Elon Musk all the time, but like when you think about him, like it's Tesla, it's all those other company behind. But 10 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg didn't go on podcast, didn't go on channel. He was just coding with his team, you know? So they understood the need of the society to be seeing one face, not just one company, because they don't trust the company anymore. They can or can't trust one person. And for a small brand, they need to put themselves out there. It's like, it's like you're going to be your own media company. If there's no faces, well, you're probably not going to relate to them. And that might be also an issue for news industry because, yeah, The Guardian is great. Okay, it looks wonderful. New York Times also, but who are you? Like, really, who are you? The person wants to know who are you, like who you are and are you.
Awesome. Well, one last question for you.
Yep.
So for anybody listening who works in the newsroom and they're looking to build deeper emotional connection with their audience this week, what's one practical storytelling action that they can take? What's one thing that they could start doing today?
I would say, and it resonates a little bit what I said earlier, it's like write one paragraph about the reason why you are like showing up to work every day. Because I think people will remember your conviction way more than your credential.
Love that. Love that. Theo, anything you'd like to add before I say thank you so much?
Thank you, Francesca. That was great.
Thank you. It was great.